Ponytails. Read by Scribbler. Soarins Quest by Electric Cessive.
And we just add a little more cinnamon, a touch of sea salt, and a bit of, olive oil, I guess.
Soarin sighed as he mixed all of the ingredients together in his mixing bowl. The splattered remains of his previous failed attempts lay in ruins strewn across the Wonderbolt's kitchen, making the room look like it had been a site of a massive preschool food fight. Pieces of raw dough hung from ceiling fans. Globs of apple filling splattered the counters in patterns that only kindergarteners could make, and his apron was practically coated in 2 different layers of chocolate. Even his normally pristine athletic body was covered in filth.
How do ponies even bake? If this is what happens, then I don't even know how they can make a donut, let alone a pie. So what if I accidentally put a tablespoon of baking soda instead of a teaspoon? There's no reason it should have exploded in the oven like that.
Soarin sighed. Surely the 57th time had to be the charm. Surely. Otherwise, Soarin just didn't know what he was going to do. None of the other Wonderbolts really knew how to cook. He really didn't like the way that their personal chef cooked her pies either. They were disgusting. Soggy, limp crust, and lackluster filling that jiggled like a fat pony on a treadmill. He shuddered just thinking about feeling the vile substance enter his stomach. He nearly dry-heaved. No, this pie had to be absolutely perfect. It had to be. He couldn't take the pain of not being able to taste the most glorious pie he'd ever tasted. Delicious, delicious apple pies, pumpkin pies. Soarin snapped out of his pie-induced trance, only to realize that he had been using his automatic mixer the entire time, not paying attention to the motions he was making with it. He looked once at the empty bowl.
This is friggin' impossible! I've been trying for over 3 hours now, and I have not successfully made one pie.
Soarin slumped down over the counter, breathing a heavy sigh. Delicious, flaky crust. That's all he wanted. Not Mud Pony's paradise. As he sat there, he realized that he would need outside help. He wanted to be able to make his own dessert, to be free to eat them whenever he wanted. He wanted to be able to do things himself and not always have to rely on other ponies the entire time. As he sat there, he remembered suddenly the pies from the Grand Galloping Gala. Specifically, the one that had been given by that orange earth pony mare. He remembered the consistency of the filling. Nice and firm, but not too stagnant. Just enough to allow for a satisfying chew. And that crust. Such beautiful crunch that he could have sworn it could be heard from the moon, but delicate enough to melt in his mouth.
I know what I need to do,
Soarin stated, rising up from his grumpy, defeated position on the floor.
I need to go to Ponyville.
Quickly, he took off, setting a straight course for where he knew it was. He was lucky that it was his day off today. Otherwise, he might have been moping all day. The trip to Ponyville had been rather uneventful. Just Soarin thinking to himself in his head how would be the best way to approach the mayor. It wasn't every day that a celebrity just showed up on your doorstep asking you to teach him how to bake. This was going to take careful planning, precision, and... His mind cut off its own train of thought, noticing the large farm on the outskirts of the small town.
Well, that's the only farm I see around here with an apple orchard. And if I recall correctly, that mare had an apple cutie mark. Maybe she lives here.
Soarin landed softly in front of the large farmhouse, kicking up a light cloud of dust particles and breathing deeply. Without a moment's hesitation, he stepped forward and knocked on the front door. "Some pony at the front door? Oh, hang on, I'm coming. I'll just be a second," a voice responded from the other side. Soarin turned his head to the side to see an old green mare in a rocking chair. He gave her a slight nod of recognition, which she returned in kind.
Weird. Normally, ponies would be overreacting to me being here. Huh. I wonder how this is gonna play out.
His thoughts were interrupted as the door opened slowly, an orange mare in a Stetson hat staring at him. "Yeah? Who's the... Soarin? What are you doing here at the farm? Ain't you supposed to be working or something?" Soarin shook his head.
No, ma'am. Today's my day off. They're not using me in the next show. I've been in the last 3. They want to give the new recruits a chance to shine through, give the spotlight to the rookies. Anyway, I came here because, well, I know this is gonna sound really weird, but I was wondering if you could maybe teach me how to bake? I was trying for so long this morning, but I just couldn't get it down, and I remembered the delightful pie you sold me at the gala.
Applejack scratched the back of her head in both humility and slight confusion. "Well, gee, I'm real flattered, Soarin. I really am, but I'm kind of busy today. I still have a lot of work to do, and I really don't have the time. Besides, I'm not really the best teacher for this kind of thing. I think you may want to go and check out Sugar Cube Corner if you're looking to take up baking. They're the local bakery." Soarin frowned slightly.
That's alright. Thank you for your time, and for pointing me in the right direction.
With that, he took off into the air, flying towards the gingerbread building in the distance. Something about that building just screamed baking to him. Perhaps it was because of the building's sweet theme. He pushed his way through the large sugar glass door. He looked around, admiring all of the goodies and treats among the shelves and various spices that filled the store. Entire trays of chocolate eclairs, donuts, brownies, and anything else his sweet tooth could have imagined surrounded him. For the first time in a long time, he felt like a colt in a candy store. This was definitely the place he was looking for.
Hello?
Soarin called out. There didn't seem to be any pony manning the store at the moment. The whole shop seemed to be rather empty to him. It made his stomach sink as he thought to himself,
What if I can't do this? What if I'm not cut out for making my own pies? I mean, I really want to, but I don't know the first thing about it.
"Hiya!" the pink pony said, popping up from behind the counter. Soarin jumped back, startled by the sudden address. Taking a second to calm his shaky breath, he turned to the mare, who seemed to have appeared out of thin air. He opened his mouth to address her.
Excuse me, miss,
You came here because you wanted to learn how to bake, and you've been trying really hard and you don't know what to do, and you're not too confident in your abilities to learn, so you came to get help from the best, and you came here because Applejack was busy, and you only have a short amount of time to learn, and did I get it right?"
She said, bouncing happily the whole time.
Yeah. How did you know that?
Soarin said, staring dumbfounded at her.
"Well, this sort of thing happens almost every other week. Applejack used to help ponies learn how to bake, but she wasn't a very good teacher. But don't tell her I said that. Plus, why else would you want to come into a bakery with a sign on the door that says closed? It's obvious."
Yeah, that's exactly it. So, do you think you can help me? I'd really appreciate it. Maybe I could get you some tickets and a backstage pass to one of our shows or something to repay you.
Pinkie Pie tapped her hoof to her chin, seemingly deep in thought.
"I can teach you. But then again, I don't know if a newbie like you would be able to keep up with my fast pace. Not to mention that the story says I shouldn't be the one to do it. I have an even better idea. Hold on, I'll go get my boss, Mrs. Cake. She taught me everything I know. Everything!"
She stuck her face very close to Soarin's, invading his privacy to punctuate that last word.
Yeah, that sounds good, I guess. I mean, as long as I'm learning. And what was that about a
Okay, I'll go get her. Bye!
With that, Pinkie Pie shot up the stairs to the second floor. Soarin merely shook his head and shrugged it off and decided to take a further look around. In the back room behind the counter, he could see through the double doors to what looked to be a humble little kitchen. Nothing grand or glorious like the one he'd come to know at the Wonderbolt's ground. It was fairly small. There were a few stainless steel pots and pans hanging on a large magnet on the wall, and all sorts of ingredients from eggs to flour lay spread in an organized pattern on the counter.
Huh. Weird.
Soarin chuckled to himself. It was almost like they knew he was coming. He passed the thought off in his mind, taking steps towards the kitchen in order to get a better look through the small windows on the double doors.
Ah, hello, dear. Are you the one that wanted to learn about baking?
An older mare asked from behind him.
Yes, actually. Mrs. Cake, I take it? It's nice to meet you. Do you think that you might be able to help me out? I'm less than amazing at this sort of thing.
Soarin rubbed the back of his neck sheepishly, chuckling.
Well, Pinky insisted on me helping her friend, so I suppose I can. You'd better be prepared, though. Baking is an exact science. It takes accuracy, pinpoint precision, excellent timing, and a level head. You have to be willing to put in the time and patience into it. The more passion you put into baking, the better your products will end up being. Now, do you think you're ready?
Ready as I'll ever be, ma'am.
Soarin saluted her, eliciting a chuckle.
Well then, follow me into the kitchen.
Soarin did as he was told, following the elderly mare into the cozy kitchen. It gave him a sort of old-timey family feel that made him feel welcome and at home. Mrs. Cake tossed him an apron to put on.
Oh, you might want to put this on, dear. Your current attire looks less than desirable. I'm surprised you were walking around in public like that.
Soarin looked down at his own body, realizing that he had forgotten to remove his chocolate-soaked apron and take a shower before departing. A deep blush began to form on his face, causing him to turn away and attempt to brush the debris from his coat. Unfortunately for him, the sticky nature of it all made it cling to him like lint to a pants pocket. Sighing, he took off his old apron and replaced it with the new, vibrant, pink one. He felt a part of his masculinity snap away.
Sorry about that. I must have forgotten to get cleaned up before I came over here. Can't believe I missed that.
Soarin chuckled, rubbing the back of his neck sheepishly.
So, where do we start?
First things first. You have to wash your hooves anytime before you handle food, especially when you look like that.
Mrs. Cake gave a hearty laugh in the way that only a mare experienced in the ways of the world could. Soarin went over to the sink, rinsing and lathering his hooves with soap multiple times to make sure they were clean before drying them off on a conveniently placed hoof towel.
All right, so the hooves are washed, the bowls and ingredients look ready. What's next?
Soarin asked.
First, take the eggs and crack them over the smaller bowl. No! Don't just slam them down on the edge of the bowl. Lightly crack them like this.
Mrs. Cake took the egg that Soarin had been attempting to bludgeon the side of the poor plastic bowl with. She held it up carefully, bringing it just to the upper lip of the mixing bowl before lightly thrusting it downward. With graceful poise, she split the two halves of the eggshell, allowing the innards to fall peacefully into the bowl.
Now, we only need 2 more eggs with this recipe. I'll let you go ahead and crack them with your own hooves for practice. It's important to know the proper way to crack an egg.
Soarin nodded. He took one of the other eggs. Copying Mrs. Cake's movements, he tapped the egg lightly on the edge of the bowl, splitting the halves. His clumsy, inexperienced hooves caused the 2 halves to cave in slightly, resulting in a slightly less graceful fall for the egg, leading to an almost broken yolk. Knowing what to do now, he took a deep breath and did the same with the other egg, albeit in a much more successful attempt.
All right, eggs are cracked, ma'am. What's next?
Didn't drop any eggshells in there? Good. Now, time to put the dry ingredients together into the larger bowl. Most of the ingredients have already been measured out. You just need to measure out the flour. 3 cups should do it.
With another nod, Soarin stepped over to the measuring cup and flour. He had screwed up royally on this step before. Measuring wasn't exactly his forte. Picking up the slightly heavy flour sack with one hoof, he began to pour into the measuring cup on the counter, The flow of flour was not constant, instead increasing and decreasing at random intervals. Mrs. Cake steadied his hoof, allowing him to measure much more accurately. Satisfied, he poured the cups of flour in one by one.
All right. Now, put the butter in with the eggs and mix them with the dry ingredients.
Soarin did as told, mixing the ingredients until they were as smooth as possible. Mrs. Cake put the mixture in the oven for approximately 20 minutes, allowing it to bake a bit and form the crust for the pie. Soarin watched avidly, taking notes of all the steps and procedures for his own use at home.
All right, we're making apple pie today. So, you need to take those freshly diced apples and add a bit of cinnamon and a hint of nutmeg and about a cup of sugar to them. Got it?
Soarin nodded again. He felt a pride in himself as he mixed the filling exactly according to Mrs. Cake's directions. Occasionally, he would mess up a measurement or mix too quickly, but Mrs. Cake always directed him towards the right path. For the first time, he believed that his baking attempts were going to proceed.
All right, we'll let the crust cool for about 10 minutes. Then pour in the filling and bake it fully. We'll put the top crust on when it's time to bake.
A grateful nod from Soarin signaled that he had understood her direction. He felt a deep pride in himself for coming so far in such a short time. 40 minutes later, the pie had been removed from the oven, fully baked. Soarin looked at it in awe. A golden brown crust, slightly fluffier than normal, but still crispy to the touch. A beautiful, orangish-coloured apple filling caused him to drool. The smell of fresh dessert hung heavy in the air like a blanket over a sleeping child, soothing him to his very soul.
Wow. Thanks, Mrs. Cake. You're really good at this, aren't you?
I've been doing this for a living for nearly 30 years, honey. I know what I'm doing by now. Speaking of which, you managed to pick everything up pretty quickly. I'd say all you needed was a push in the right direction. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have some business to attend to. I wish you the best of luck in your future baking ventures,
Mrs. Cake said, smiling as she walked out of the door. Soarin smiled and waved, deciding to take a bite out of his new pie. A cascade of flavour washed over him like a waterfall, coating his taste buds in a little piece of apple heaven. It was on par even with that glorious pie that he'd had at the gala such a long time ago. With a smile, Soarin exited the shop, pie in tow, and waved goodbye to its inhabitants. Today had been a good day. He'd learned something new. He'd acquired a skill that he'd always wanted. All that was left now was for him to continue practicing, perfecting his craft. With a smile, Soarin began to fly back towards his home in the Wonderbolt's camp. Perhaps baking a pie wasn't so hard after all. Perhaps he had only needed a push in the right direction to awaken what had been inside him the entire time. That was Soarins Quest. It was written by Electric Sessive and read by Scribbler, with special guest voice actors Goombasa as Soarin and the lost narrator as Mrs. Cake. Okay, something happier after my last upload of Negeb on Halloween. Very many thanks to everybody who's commented on that Halloween fic. It was definitely a task to do it, but I'm glad it went down as well as it did. I think I did say on the video that I'd never really done Halloween specials and Halloween themed things before, so as a first attempt, I'm glad people didn't hate it, put it that way. Also, apologies for the sound quality in this last little bit. I am recording this on the internal mic on the laptop, and it is not the best quality, but needs must. In other news, right, there is a final confirmed release date for the first episode of The Heroic Tale of Heroically Heroic Heroes, the radio play that I've been working on since June. The first episode is done, it is ready, the last of the art is in. It's all ready to be released on the 16th of November, so that's Saturday the 16th of November. Please look out for it. Please tune in and please do leave some feedback for all the people involved. It is a full cast radio play written by me and with music by Reverb Brony featuring voices of people like Brain by Saucepans and Pounce, and I am Shadow 007, an Adoxographist. A Bag of Vicodin, the author from Fanfiction if anybody recognises that name. Quiet Water, Deft Funk, Deadly Reg, Sweedly and Black Irish Balloon. They're all involved in episode 1 and we would really be pleased if you tune in and listen to it. Right, grovelling over, I will see you next time. Be lovely to each other and good night everybody.